Welcome to the Dr. Diane Show, where we explore revolutionary expansion of mind, body, and soul with me, Dr. Diane Hayden. With over 20 years of expertise as a mindset warrior, perspective shifter, and unshakable optimist, I am dedicated to helping you reach your wildest dreams in business, health, performance, and relationships. Learn about the power of thought and how it shapes your life to take risks, change careers, find love, go on adventures, and live passionately with me, Dr. Diane. Get ready for revolutionary ways of thinking, being, and creating an amazing life. The Dr. Diane Show starts now. Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Diane Hayden, and you are listening to the Dr. Diane Show on Transformation Talk Radio. Stay with us for the next hour, where we will explore revolutionary expansion of mind, body, and soul. Each time on the Dr. Diane Show, we have experts from around the country discussing cutting-edge topics on longevity medicine, natural health, mindset, spirituality, and soul purpose to help you shift your perspective and become a mindset warrior like me. I'm excited today to have Andrew Matusiak. He started Challenging Minds, LLC with a motivation to integrate a holistic approach to treating mental health. Andrew focuses on a bottom-up and top-down approach to counseling, supporting clients with different mindfulness, breathing, and grounding approaches that reduce anxiety over time. He is certified as a meditation teacher and practices CBT, MBCT, and is a certified accelerated resolution therapist, which specializes in treating anxiety, phobias, and trauma disorders. Andrew has worked in diverse social work settings, including skilled nursing facilities, residential treatment programs for behavioral adolescents, and he supervised over 50 therapists in a large mental health organization before opening up Challenging Minds in 2019. By the coping methods taught in therapy, Andrew believes that clients can be brought to their full agency, leading to a compassionate, self-directed, and organized perspective, allowing for emotional and mental freedom. So welcome, Andrew. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for that, Diane. That was it was nice to hear good things said about me once in a while.
I'm sure they're said about you more than once in a while with all the amazing work that you do, for sure. So I wanted to start with kind of just the background. I mean, so you've come from a pretty diverse career, and what prompted you to take the leap and start your own business and open Challenging Minds?
You know, a couple of things, really. The biggest of which is every different place in which I worked, whether it was as a school intern, and then I at one point was a school social worker, plenty of time spent with adolescents especially, and then also managing others. I regularly saw that mental health was getting a Band-Aid and then being passed along to the other person that they were going to be, dealing with in their next steps, whether it be in some cases a probation officer, or was it a parent, or was it themselves as an adult trying to work out their own problems. But everything was just kind of isolating the issue, but then never really getting to the root cause. Challenging Minds is really trying to do that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And talk about, the timing is perfect for us doing this, because I just feel like, this is not to say that mental health should not have been a priority in years past, but I think now people are finally realizing that, it's not something that I need to sweep under the under the rug, and it's something that we really need to have these conversations about and help people feel comfortable and, equipped, I think, to go out and seek people and, places like Challenging Minds, to get the help that they need, for sure. So tell me what makes Challenging Minds different than a traditional mental health practice.
Yeah. So originally it was just me, back in 19, as I mentioned, or as you mentioned so well. I was trying to find a space just to work out what I knew I wanted, but I didn't really know the road to get there, to be very honest. As you also mentioned, I came out of a larger company that required a lot of different corporate entities as they were attached to it. And I regularly saw the patient kind of getting a shorter end of that stick. And I wouldn't blame the company. It's just the model of healthcare right now. Everything is so fast and everything is at a speed that the client or the patient does not get what they're needing. And so they get passed along, like I mentioned. So I was hoping, as I saw that personally, that we could start to make corrections to it and over time build in other features, other components that were not only talk therapy or not only pushing them into another category, another person's problem, but instead give them the tools so they can go home weekly, hopefully, and transition to a place where they can begin taking care of their own needs over time. And like I often tell my clients who are new to me, I don't have the best business model around, but my hope is to discharge you sooner than later. And with the skills that you'll have to not have to ever know me again. And that really is sometimes I would say about 50% of our clients have a short stay with us because they learn how to breathe correctly. They learn how to maybe meditate. They learn that yoga can be a really fantastic option. They learn how to take care of themselves again and remember that they're important above everyone else, just so everything else can go well. And we see people starting to learn that they can enjoy their life again and not only just survive.
Yeah. I mean, it's very similar to what we see in just traditional medicine, with kind of this uh just in and out mentality that if you go to a traditional medical doctor you're going to get versus if you go to a naturopath. I mean, we talk about this all the time when I have naturopaths on my show in terms of how different they are in really trying to find the root cause of what the particular issue is that the person's having, but also in getting them better faster and not just keeping them in the system, so to speak. And you said it may not be the best business model, but I think it is the best business model because you're truly helping people.
Mhm.
Because, then not to say that they might not have a challenge down the road where they would need you for something else, but at least whatever they're dealing with right now, they're not just continuing to stay in therapy for weeks and months and years and never really getting anywhere. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that have said that. And my response to them is, I think maybe you need a different therapist. Like,
Well, it's funny. It's really
right?
true.
Like,
It never felt good for me to see somebody weekly and only let them deliver all that I want someone to come and talk to me about what's going on, but then if we don't have a solution in mind that also can be carried out in practical terms, then what are we really doing, right?
right.
And what we also know is in positive psychology and the research that's been done in the last decade is that if we vent or if we're negative about a problem, the one thing we can be sure of is that problem will get bigger. So instead, we actually take a very, and I can't speak for every counselor that works for me on every day, but most of us have an approach that we recognize there's a problem. And then we also recognize that we need to point our efforts towards a creative solution that is going to include a lot of different options, possibly, but that the person, because of that, won't also go and be navigating towards that negative space again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally get it. I mean, my mindset is what you think about, you'll create in your life, essentially.
Right.
Same thing with what you talk about. And so that's why I never quite got talk therapy to me just never really resonated because I felt like that's all you typically did was you just go there and you talk about it. And then by the time you know it, your hour's up. And it's like, okay, we'll see you next week. And you come back next week and you might be talking about a little bit, something a little bit different, like a different quote story, but it's still the same thing. And you're not, like you're saying, you're not, okay, we've heard the story. Now, how do we progress beyond that? Right? Like, how do we stop thinking about it, talking about it? I mean, and the story becomes almost like an entity in and of itself, right? And it's, something that's hard for people to get beyond when that's what they're continually focused on.
Absolutely. And our nervous system does not help us in that sense because it's engineered to protect us from threats. So the starting place is I usually start with my clients on psychoeducation that your nervous system is not going to like what we're going to do. It's going to actually think what we're doing is antithetical to a solution. It's going to think that we're adding to a bigger problem because now it has to take its eye off the prize, which is the negative feature that we've been worried about. And as we do that, we're vulnerable. And vulnerability does not lead to most people wanting to come back to therapy because they feel very exposed. But that exposure is how you heal, right? Just like anything. So the patients that actually stay in therapy longer term, usually require it because they've been unpacking things that have been packed in for so long. And we finally get to a place where we realize that there's a person under there that's never been hurt before, so.
Yeah. Well, just like with any kind of chronic disease, right? I mean, people are always frustrated or surprised when they can't fix something immediately. And, any naturopath will say to you, well, you didn't get to this stage of chronic disease overnight, in a
Right.
week, in a month, whatever. So it's going to take time to actually, like you just said, unpack that, right? Like basically do what needs to be done to figure out what the root cause is, and then, how you're going to treat it. But it takes time. And it sounds, therapy shouldn't be any different than that.
Yeah, I agreed. And when I said I have a lousy discharge or a lousy business model, I usually see people anywhere from 6 months, maybe a year, unless they're very serious and complex disorders, which do happen for sure. And in that space, I definitely get people that come back for a tune-up, which is totally appropriate, like you would do for anything you have an investment in, right? But the other good thing too is that we're pretty transparent, and our company's name is really Challenging Minds for a reason. So it presents what we're trying to offer you from the very beginning. We expect that if you come to us, we will poke you and make sure that you're here to work. And we are not a therapist that's going to sit there and placate you, for the simple reason we know that's not helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not always liked for the same reason too. That's okay. That's
Well,
okay.
that's exactly right. And you know what? You're not meant for everybody, and everybody's not meant for you. And that's, that's things that you learn, I think, in business fairly quickly, that you don't have to have everybody, and people will be attracted to you for certain reasons that they're not attracted to other types of therapists. And to me, what you're saying is amazing, because I guess my mindset is I want to be challenged. I love the name Challenging Minds. Like I would totally be drawn to that. And, I want to solve something. I want to figure this out and move past it. And that's what you're saying you're doing for people. And yeah, I guess a good business model might be something that creates residual income where, if we look at people like a product, they're going to continue to come, and there's your residual income. But are you really helping people in that?
Right.
You're not. I don't think. And is that really what we want to do with medicine?
And that's the right way to look at it too, the way you just put it. And so at the wellness center, we have the wellness center in Bantam that offers spa-like, arrangements for people that want that other holistic approach. One of them is a sauna. It's an infrared sauna that has a couples option in it. And so we let that be like the one caveat, that even if you don't want to come here for any real hard work, you can go there and enjoy yourself and relax. But even that's going to make you work a little bit, because it gets so warm in there and it challenges your body to release some of those toxins. And then you go home and figure out on your end if that's enough for you. So
yeah, that's absolutely true. So we're going to take a short break. We're going to talk more about Challenging Minds and everything that you offer. You're listening to the Dr. Diane Show with me, Dr. Diane Hayden. When we come back, we'll explore more about Andrew Matusiak and Challenging Minds. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We're back on the Dr. Diane Show with me, Dr. Diane Hayden. But before we continue, I want to make sure everyone knows how to contact me. You can find me at www.drdianehayden.com, or at either of my two publications, www.naturalnutmeg.com and www.essentialnaples.com. And you can learn more about Andrew Matusiak at www.challengingminds.net. That's ChallengingMinds.net. So welcome back, Andrew. One of the things that you do that I find really fascinating, I know a little bit about it, but I wanted to, talk more for myself to learn, and also our listeners, is accelerated resolution therapy. So tell us a little bit about what that is and how that's different from traditional talk therapy.
Yeah, so it's also known as ART, or also art therapy, which many people confuse with drawing a stick figure or painting, which it is not. So we're often recommended people for art therapy. We have to make sure they know why they're here. So
right.
Extensive trauma can leave an imprint on the nervous system pretty powerfully. And so to give you an example, if somebody had, we're actually going to use a live example of somebody that will leave their name out, but if they had an incident at a younger age, and at that younger age, they were almost drowning in a situation where they were in the water. And then they leave that situation with a pretty big imprint that was a scary and terrifying event. And they were afraid of that water, and they developed a phobia thereafter. So I treated a client in that description, and then about 40 years later, she decided that she really wanted to swim for the first time. And I met with her for a couple of years. This is one of my longer clients that I had at the time based on other features, but that was important to her for a good reason. And as we were meeting together, we went through the ART therapy, which I'll explain more in a moment. And by the end of that session, she had booked a swimming lesson the following day. I think it was the next day, that week for sure. And she was able to swim for the first time in 40 years.
Wow, that's
after
amazing.
one session. Yeah, really neat.
That is amazing.
Really neat.
Yeah,
And
so tell us how that works.
Yeah,
people are probably like, there's no way.
There's no way. There's no way. What really works about it, there's a couple ways to facilitate what they call bilateral stimulation. And what we're doing is we're forcing the left and the right brain to talk when they normally aren't great at that, when someone has had a bad experience, like I mentioned with that person. So if the left brain is very logically oriented, as most of us know, it deals with concrete solutions, and the right brain is very creative and sometimes imaginative to a point of creating negative stories. So when we worry, we're essentially more in that right brain than we want to be. ART therapy, or another type of therapy similar to that one called EMDR, they both, by causing rapid eye movement similar to how we would have in sleep, they force the left and the right hemispheres to talk, because the left side controls the right side of the body and the right brain hemisphere controls the left side of the body. So in my case, I give them tappers to hold in their hands, and as those two vibrating tappers go back and forth, their left and right eyes go back and forth, their left and right hemispheres talk to each other. So it's almost like saying you have two parents, a mom and a dad, that are not normally getting along. They're out in different places, and then we bring them together to communicate. And the fear center beneath that, the limbic system, as it's called, the children, as we could call it in this metaphor, suddenly become relaxed and able to do the work. And the best part of the therapy is they don't actually have to describe what happened to them at all. Everything they do is in the own luxury of their own mind, as I prompt them to do different things with I say self-hypnosis because it's not exactly hypnosis, but it's called Gestalt therapy, which is very similar to neuro-linguistic programming.
Okay.
Basically meaning that I would suggest to them first to see the event as it happened, and then we would actually have them take the physical feelings that they're having in their body and recognize them for what they are, and then try to alter those feelings through different suggestions that we would bring in. So if that person had a bunch of tension in their back, we would say, back the tension out. And as we do that with the eye movements, it actually tells the body what to do with that tension. As the tension is released, now we can create a new narrative. We're creating a new storyline for the person to follow. So in that person's incident, she didn't actually experience the same trouble in the water anymore. She saw herself getting rescued in a positive way. So in her mind, she now has a menu of choices to go to. Even though the event didn't change and she knows the truth of the event, now the mind has different options to go to and no more fear related to it because of that. And that's kind of a very short elevator summary of a very kind of complex treatment that works extremely well if the person is able to just follow the basic instructions of seeing the event and then recreating it in a better light.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, I'm guessing there are probably some scenarios where, because of what the trauma was, would you not use this, meaning you wouldn't want to take them back through that experience?
Actually, it's even more appropriate. So
really,
an
okay.
example. Yeah, sometimes it can be, and it's case specific. So it's, if somebody is very, very troubled by an experience, you'd want to be very mindful not to expose them to it in a way that could be too much. But the better part of this compared to a traditional exposure therapy is they're not going directly into the details verbatim. Instead, they're seeing it like they see it anyways, like a movie. So they're kind of replaying a tape in their mind. And myself and the client aren't describing any kind of conversation around it. So there's no exposure outward that the client has to deal with, knowing that they're going to be shamed or embarrassed further by me knowing all those fine details. And I, as the clinician, don't have to be also traumatized to listen to something that could be pretty serious day after day, hour after hour, as I'm a trauma therapist as well. So it kind of keeps that boundary for both of us to remain where it needs to be. And then at times we do discuss portions of it to be helpful to help them integrate that memory into a better space.
Wow. Yeah, that's fascinating. And one thing I wanted to just clarify, you mentioned the word tapper. So what does, so people who don't know what that means, what is a tapper?
Can I show you? Would that be okay?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So these aren't the only ways that we access eye movement therapy. The traditional way that we're taught in the training is actually to use your hand like this, like in traditional EMDR therapy as well. And by doing this, you're causing left and right eye movements to have that bilateral stimulation effect. What is also used is what they call light bars. Light bars do the same thing with an LED bar that goes back and forth, mimicking what your hand would do. I'm a master level art. The nuances are kind of important for the person that trained me, but I'm on the master level instead of the intermediate, and I don't have the certification that you would require because you have to take a separate exam for that. But I'm a third level master person that allows us to have a little more discretion and use kind of our gut versus just following the rigid rules that you would normally get. And that's where I bring in the TheraTappers. So TheraTappers are these little pods, and the individual holds onto them. And then I hold on to this device here, which helps me to control the vibration and the frequency of those pods.
Oh yeah, yep.
The faster the light goes, you can hear the pods moving back and forth now. So in the patient's hand, not only are they having those vibrations come through, they're also essentially going into what would normally look like REM activity in their brain the same way when they're sleeping, opening up a little bit of a gateway to the subconscious to be able to get in there and reprogram what's been lost in the negative experience years ago.
Yeah. It's really fascinating to me. I mean, first of all, the brain and subconscious and all that is just, I could study that stuff all the time. I'm, constantly reading and just curious about that. I mean, it really just is amazing how I guess how much untapped potential we have, but also, the fact, the interaction between the subconscious and the conscious and how it drives all these things. And
It's
almost, yeah. And you almost might think like, do I have any control over anything? Because my subconscious mind is basically, taking this information that's been stored since, I was born and then things that have happened to me and almost kind of creating the life for you if you haven't figured out how to tap into that and make these changes, right?
Absolutely. So the person that trained me was the same person who created the therapy. Her name is Lainey Rosenzweig, and incredible person. I mean, gifted beyond belief. As I was being trained the first time around in the first series 3 years ago, she literally cured 4 or 5 therapists of phobias that they had come into the training with. Remarkably, right in front of everyone else, without question, within minutes. And it's really hard to believe. It almost looked like a superpower. Watching her do it with all the finesse and the language that she uses very appropriately, because we are essentially, to your point, made up of code. In some abstract way we are. So if we think of it that way, code can be altered if you know what you're doing with the right language. And neurolinguistic programming, Gestalt therapy, very similarly, and coupled with the exposure that happens during eye movement therapy allows for a very different change in the way that code can develop and actually turn into a behavior.
Yeah, it's really fascinating for sure. Wow. To actually witness that, I think is amazing.
It was
just
fun, yeah.
to be able to, see somebody work like that and then, actually witness it, right? Like it's just,
Yeah.
it puts it on a whole different level for you, I think. Not that people should doubt it or anything like that, but I think when you really have that type of an experience, now I can see, one, how you would be so passionate about it and want to, help people because you've seen what it can do.
Yeah, it's life altering for a lot of ways. And the biggest one being is that a lot of folks with trauma don't have a lot of expression anymore. They don't have a lot of openness anymore. And art therapy doesn't require them to be that way to get better. And what will most often happen is that wall gets separated and tears start to come out of a person who normally is very stoic, and that change in vibration is everything. That's where the frequency jumps higher and
Yeah.
their recovery is now sustainable.
Yeah, that is amazing. Well, we're going to take another quick break. You're listening to the Dr. Diane Show with me, Dr. Diane Hayden. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We're back on the Dr. Diane Show with me, Dr. Diane Hayden. I am talking today with Andrew Matusiak. He's a certified accelerated resolution therapist, and he works with treatment anxiety, phobias, trauma disorders. And you can learn more about Andrew at www.challengingminds.net. So we were talking all about accelerated resolution therapy. It sounds, amazing in terms of just the success that you've had with people. And in general, I think it's something that, everybody should be learning about and know about and learn how you guys are different than a traditional mental health practice. So I also wanted to chat a little bit about what other kinds of therapy models do you offer there?
Yeah, so we do work out of the traditional wheelhouses that most therapists have as well, like cognitive behavioral therapy. We have a dialectical behavioral therapy staff member. We have most people are cross-trained across different models. I'm trained in a model called mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, which deals with both mindfulness, meditation, and cognitive therapy under one roof of a model. I'm a gaming and internet addiction specialist, allowing me to treat folks that have that addiction kind of in that disorder. And we also currently is one of my things that's not really practice wide is more about the breathing features that I teach, especially Buteyko breathing method.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that. I mean, I know how important breath work is. And I think that people are learning more and more about it these days, but tell me specifically about this particular breathing method.
Yeah, it's one of those methods that most people don't know about it. It's still not really popular in the States. It was nicknamed or created after its originator, who was a physician in Russia in the 60s, I want to say, Dr. Konstantin Buteyko. And he understood that through carbon dioxide tolerance, we can become much more efficient breathers, and also our bodies tend to cooperate with us more easily. So we tend to breathe up here, and most of us would, if we were guessing or tracking appropriately, would be like 12 to 15 breaths per minute. This is also an area in which we release excitatory hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, leptin, and norepinephrine. So it really isn't helpful to breathe up here, especially at that frequency. It can make us anxious as we're in an idle state like we would be right now. It's really helpful to have that space when you're running very hard, or you had to in the past getting away from like a Viking lion or bear. Today, not
right. We don't have that.
Yeah. So instead, we want to really, as most people are aware of, third chamber being the lowest chamber of our lungs, we want to breathe down there low and slow if we can, which helps us to have a lower heart rate, but also keeps our breathing at a space where it's not so driven by oxygen and there's a carbon dioxide balance to it. Carbon dioxide is a powerful chemical. It's a vasodilator. It also acts to work with oxygen to pull it off of the red blood cells so it doesn't have to go to the exterior breathing methods so frequently. And so someone trained in Buteyko breathing over a 3-month period generally goes from that same rapid breath up here and the excited features that go with it to breathing into the third chamber and breathing roughly 6 to 8 breaths per minute without having to think about it. So over time, we reset the way the breath patterns go through breath holds. And through those holds, we gain higher tolerance to carbon dioxide. And that tolerance allows less need for oxygen because the oxygen is used more efficiently.
Wow,
So
I mean, yeah, continue what were you going to say?
No, and I was going to say the reason that walks itself out to be a major benefit is that if you're only using your oxygen when you need to versus as a habit, now your system is running a lot less intensely. It's also cleaner because oxygen has a kindling effect, just like it does with fire. It doesn't, you don't need that much, which is why when we hyperventilate, I'm a Generation Xer. When I hyperventilated as a kid, they would give you a brown bag, and that was the cure for a panic attack. What we know now is they were breathing in carbon dioxide. And so what we're doing in Buteyko is we're getting used to that carbon dioxide and we're keeping it on high reserve all the time.
That's fascinating. And I just learned something new. I had no idea that there was such a, that the reasoning behind it was, between carbon dioxide and oxygen and the ratios and all of that and how that affects the body. Mm-hmm. I almost thought the opposite, that, too much carbon dioxide is not good.
That's true also.
Okay. Yeah. But so I think I know what you're saying. Go ahead.
Yeah. So if you're heavy oxygen and you're generally, without knowing it, most people, or in your sleep, perhaps, as another alternative that can happen, then there can be the extreme on that side that exists for most people. And you're right, though, it could be the extreme on the other side for people with sleep apnea as one instance where you would have too much carbon dioxide, and that cannot be a good thing too. A good coach, if you come to me, I could probably help you, will help you to find the balance that's right for you. And you really do that over time, you get that right balance over time. So 2 to 3 seconds a week and increasing your tolerance to carbon dioxide is what we look for.
Yeah, it's fascinating. But I think, I think a lot of people don't even realize how they're breathing. No, honestly, like you have to stop and think about it. Oh, where am I breathing from? Am I breathing from like up here, like, like these short little breaths, or am I really taking more deeper, longer inhalations? And you got to think about that, right? Because just with our society, everything is go, 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 go. When we're multitasking and doing a million things, sometimes I actually find that I'm holding my breath.
Right. And you probably don't know it until you caught yourself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you look at it, like I have 2 children at home that have not yet developed the full ego features, and they breathe nice and slow into their stomachs most of the time, unless they're upset, and then it's all up here. So we can see it in a child very easily. As adults, we forget that we have, like you said, the awareness goes away. And that awareness is a big feature of our practice too. So along with the breathing, I'm coupling that with meditation as my next effort to get you to see how together you now have a model where you can really help yourself at home. Because if you start to become aware by meta awareness, or we could call it metacognition, where you're aware of your own thinking, aware of your own body, now you can start to alter it. But until you become aware, you can't be responsible.
Right. I would think that as children and even as adults, we should encourage more people to get involved in singing or musical instruments. Because yes. I remember, so I played the clarinet when I grew up, and I just remember there was there was all this work around where you breathe from. That's and right. Same thing with a vocalist, right? Like you don't breathe from up here, you breathe from your stomach, like from that area. And I've forgotten all that, of course. I haven't played since I was a kid. But just as you were talking and I was thinking about, how do we train ourselves to breathe that way? I almost feel like, it might be good to encourage people to try those different things, because that almost, when you're doing that, you're not even consciously thinking of it. You're just practicing your instrument or your vocals or whatnot.
Yeah, no, you're right. And it isn't, a lot of people, when they hear this type of thing, the first response I get is, I've been breathing my whole life. I don't need to really be taught. So the method that I'll introduce before that, which is not really a trademarked method, but also a very good one, is called 4-7-8 breathing. And 4-7-8 is just like it sounds. You breathe in for 4, you hold it for 7, and to the same point as Buteyko, you're releasing it now for 8. So that longer exhale is going to bring you into parasympathetic. So as we have that longer exhale and that that 4-second inhale, your body now just dropped blood pressure points, heart rate points, and you're no longer up here, you're down here. So that's my fire alarm breathing method, where Buteyko helps you to maintain a new standard without having to work as hard in the future.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that you combine meditation with, cognitive behavioral therapy. So you're when you're working with a client, you're teaching them, I mean, obviously you're doing whatever the therapy is that you're doing. And then do you actually teach them to meditate? Do they do that with you, or is that something that you give them for quote homework, or how does that work?
Definitely both. Yeah. So I give them a tutorial that I would give to somebody that I also teach. I teach classes in meditation. So it's just a class, an abridged one for myself and the client. And there's a little nuances that are important to them that when they don't get that teaching, it can be a really hard thing to enjoy. So we kind of get the basics down, and then, yeah, I do ask that they do it for homework, but I also understand that unless someone's ready, they probably won't. So I introduce first, before meditation, I traditionally teach a body scan feature. And a body scan is a type of meditation in a Western view, I would say, more than a traditional Eastern view, where they can get used to just being in different parts of their body and progressively letting go of the stress that are in their muscles. And
Yeah,
that kind of, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, I've done that, and it's really amazing to kind of visualize, through the body, because you realize you're holding stress in certain areas that you had no idea you were doing that.
Constricting, sure, yeah. And especially as you get into your lower body that you're absent from a lot of the times when you're busy with your mind, your lower body is more constricted probably. And when you go down into that body scan feature, most people are pretty surprised that they start to let their weight down, and they start to feel a lot calmer, and then their digestion usually improves pretty quickly. I've seen people come off of blood pressure medications by using that method only, and that's really the work of Jon Kabat-Zinn that brought that to its truth that it was in the 80s, and that's still sustained till now. So
yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that about digestion too, because there's all kinds of things that, go. I'm a huge fan of meditation. Been doing it for years, and I read books on this all the time, and it's just amazing the stuff that I've seen and I've read in terms of how that can help heal the body.
yeah,
Everything from, chronic diseases to, all kinds of physical things that you wouldn't think that would have an effect on. And it really does.
yeah, it's a remarkable, and the list is becoming longer as the Buddhists have allowed us to study their religion.
So, yeah, definitely.
Neat.
It really is. It really is. I'm actually going to a week-long workshop with Joe Dispenza in April.
Oh, good
So
for
I'm going
you.
to be immersed in meditation for a week, but I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be really, really amazing. And there's some pretty cool stuff that happens at these events, I've heard.
I've heard the same. I know someone quite well that went to one, and I've read a number of his books, and he's a pretty powerful influencer. So
Yeah. I'm excited about that. So we're going to take another quick break. You are listening to the Dr. Diane Show with me, Dr. Diane Hayden. We're talking with Andrew Matusiak. He has a practice called Challenging Minds in Torrington and Bantam, Connecticut. His website is www.challengingminds.net. And when we come back, we're going to be learning more from him. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We're back on the Dr. Diane Show with me, Dr. Diane Hayden. You can learn more about me at www.drdianehayden.com or either of my two magazines, naturalnutmeg.com or essentialnaples.com. And I'm talking today with Andrew Matusiak. He's a certified accelerated resolution therapist and the owner of Challenging Minds in Torrington and Bantam, Connecticut. You can learn more about him at www.challengingminds.net. And so before we finish, we've got a little bit more time left with our show. I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to tell people about all the other services that you have at Challenging Minds, because we're talking mostly about therapy, but you offer a lot of really cool physical types of body work and energy medicine types things. So tell us about what those are.
Yeah, so we've been kind of very, very particular about who we hire here for the capacities that you just mentioned. So we have, as a lead massage therapist, a woman who's over 30 years in her field, The comments that we typically get from her are, that wasn't a massage, but whatever it was, I want that again. And you know, just that totally letting go of everything, forgetting where you are kind of experience, and then leaving with a very big light footprint on your back instead of that heaviness you came in with. And we also have a woman who is becoming very well known in this area, Tara Cornish, who is a reflexologist that does work for us here in the building, and then has her own spaces out and about in Litchfield County. But reflexology was new to me until I met her, and I was sold the first time that she trialed it on me. So that's been another interesting aspect to healthcare that I think has had its roots for thousands of years in other countries. But again, she's showing the prevalence of how much it can be helpful today here in our allopathic method of approaching healthcare and trying something different. And then we also have Reiki therapists. Tara is also Reiki trained, and we have 2 other Reiki therapists with us. Reiki is an energy healing type of component that helps people to clear away a lot of what I would say is more or less blocking features in their body. And I don't have practice personally in that, but I do find that clients that are struggling with spiritual topics, that have anxiety, maybe they have features of neurology that are not normally typical, like it could be related to autism or ADHD or any of those things that can cause changes to be from the norm, if you will. They do really well with Reiki because there's no talking involved. There's just a whole lot of quietness and really getting to that person's physical needs. We also have an infrared sauna that I mentioned, but to explore that further, it has chromal light therapy in there as well, which helps in different ways to resolve different issues. And homeopathic doctors locally will send their patients both for cancer, not as a cancer treatment on its own, but as an adjunct to their cancer treatment to minimize the cell growth, Lyme's disease treatments and things like that, mold treatments if people are exposed to mold, and then also those folks that just want to take a break from the cold weather, you know. But it's a very spa-like environment, custom made. We had a contractor build the whole thing out so that it was both meant for quality and not for quantity, as you would normally find at a traditional massage space.
Yeah, I really love what you're doing because I feel like it's, you've incorporated everything that somebody would need from the perspective of, not only mental health care, but also body work, energy work. And I think most of our listeners, if not all, are all kind of the same mindset where, we believe that you need all of these things to really be as healthy as possible from, from the standpoint of being able to move energy, and that disease starts in the energy body before it actually manifests in the physical body. And so you could be, going through therapy and releasing like a lot of trauma and that kind of thing, but where does that energy go? Right. Sometimes it gets, stuck in the body. And so that's when you need a body worker, massage or reflexology. I love Tara, by the way, she's awesome. And or like energy medicine or Reiki, something to be able to, to release that from an energetic perspective. And I'm hoping that more and more people are, exploring this kind of thing and learning more about it to understand how important all of these aspects are. And the fact that you've brought them all together in one place is amazing.
Thank you. That really was our hope, was to be able to pull that off. We cherish our landlord, if you ever were to hear this, because he really gave us full carte blanche to be able to do whatever that we wanted with this beautiful home and create a really, cool experience here. When people arrive, they get to do something different in Bantam or in local areas that don't provide these things. So it is fun to be able to kind of show people there's a different way to do things. We believe in natural, going to a doctor for the reasons that you should, but we also agree that proactive healthcare, by what you do to offer your own needs of protection by these methods, are even more helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. So I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts about the future of mental health care? What do you envision the future to be? And if there's more sustainable and positive outcomes, what would that include?
Well, regular question I receive from clients fielded through the internet typically is this service, meaning the ones I just mentioned, are they covered by insurance? And I usually have to say no, and yoga right now, as we also offer that, is the one that they're considering at times with different health insurance companies like Connecticut, I heard, might be looking at that. But I would really hope that as a system, as we're progressing in all these areas that we are in our country, that we could also adopt these methods in a way that are actually going to sustain healthcare in a different way than is only driven by heavy financial means. Meaning that if I go for a Hartford treatment, whether it be a big hospital or a small outfit, I'm going to spend possibly all of my deductible there to get one thing taken care of. It shouldn't necessarily bankrupt a person to take care of their bodies. And I believe that if healthcare could also provide a stipend to take care of your bodies in the ways that we offer here, then most people wouldn't necessarily end up at that place where they're spending their entire deductible, or the healthcare company has to do the same.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I also think that, part of my mission is to teach people to be more responsible for their health, right?
Definitely.
So that's what we do with all the education that we do with our magazines and, these podcasts, interviewing practitioners like yourself, just to get more information out there so that people realize if I started doing some of these things now, what am I going to save myself in the future? Probably from some type of chronic disease or, really bad health situation. And instead of waiting for that to happen, do these proactive things now. Instead of waiting for insurance to pay for something, figure out a way to pay for it, because we all, the money thing for me, and I could get on a soapbox, but we only have 2 minutes left, is that, your people go out and spend money on all kinds of stuff that they don't need. But it's like healthcare is the last thing they want to spend money on. They want insurance to cover everything. And my mentality is, listen, we got to get away from that. We have to prioritize spending money on healthcare. And I agree with you that it shouldn't be exorbitant, doesn't have to be exorbitant, but we still do need to factor that in and create space for that so people can, pay for services like you do, regardless of whether it's covered by insurance or not.
I 100% agree. And I think the way to maybe meet that space in a fair place is to allow HSA features to be more broadened in their allowable use of what they can buy with those HSA features, to make a kind of an attractive quality to want to use it on those different things that are possibly helpful for their needs. And then also really education should be the next thing we open up to the public, like you're doing, to allow people to really know that there isn't just a woo-woo-y thing behind this, but there's a lot of science, a lot of it from soft to hard in the last decade that we can start to turn to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Andrew. This has been amazing. And again, people can learn more about you at challengingminds.net, and your facility is located in Bantam, Connecticut and Torrington, Connecticut. And I'm sure people will be checking you out and learning more. Thank you again so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you all for tuning into the Dr. Diane Show. Please join me the first and third Thursdays at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. Next time, we'll be discussing more about the power of thoughts and beliefs and the impact they have on your life. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning into the Dr. Diane Show, revolutionary expansion of mind, body, and soul with me, Dr. Diane Hayden. Tune in every Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern on transformationtalkradio.com. Center your thoughts on what you want and shut the door on every suggestion of fear, worry, or lack from your own consciousness or the consciousness around you. Once you master that, everything is possible. To learn more about me, Dr. Diane, and receive a free digital subscription of my magazine, visit naturalnutmeg.com.